All right, so we're back, guys. So next, we want to create a token model. I gotta come to my file manager here, and under models, I'm going to create a new file. I'll call that token, small letter, token model.js, and then I'll hit enter. All right, so what's the first thing we do when we want to create a model? Well, we need Mongoose to create the model, so I'll just import it. So const Mongoose, and that's going to be equal to I have a shortcut for this stuff. I think it's req. Yeah, so require Mongoose, and here we're just going to slot in Mongoose here as well. Yeah, so now we need to create a token schema, right? So here I'll just say const token schema. That's going to be equal to mongoose.schema, capital letter schema, and then inside of this guy we're just going to have an object that will contain the properties of the schema. All right, so next let's export it. I'll come down here and I'll put it inside a variable. I'll say const, I'll call that variable capital letter T token. That's going to be equal to, so that will point to our mongoose, our token schema, this one here. So how we're going to point to it, we're going to say mongoose dot model, and then we're going to open our parenthesis here and specify the name. So the name of the model is token, then it's going to point to token schema. Then lastly, we're just going to export it. So module.export, and that's just going to be equal to token. I feel like there should be a shortcut that will just create a template for stuffs like this, but anyway, let's just finish up. So now let's come and add the properties for our schema. In other words, the properties for this object, let's add them. So technically what we want is we want to save a token to our database, and that token we want it to be associated with a particular specific user. So the first thing we want is, let's have a user ID property, and that user ID is going to point to, the specific user that is creating that token. So how are we going to do that? First, we're going to define the type, and the type is not going to just be the regular string. The type, we want it to be an object ID. So remember, when you create a document in MongoDB, it has an ID, underscore ID, automatically attached to it. That object type is known as object ID. So the way you specify that you want an object ID here is you say mongoose dot schema, and then you define the type. So dot types, and this is the first time we're even doing this, and then you then specify that it's an object ID. You notice that everything we're doing here is in camel casing. Yeah, so here let's add a comma, and then let's say that we'll set it to required. So required, come on, help me out. So required is going to be set to true. Then lastly, we're going to reference this property to, so I'll say reference ref, and we're going to reference it to the user. Okay, now let's add a comma and let's create for the token. So I'll come down here like this, and then I'll add the token property, and this token is going to be a string. So let's give it a type of string, capital letter string, like so. Then it's going to be required as well. So let me just grab this required, and then I'll just slot that in here. Okay, then we want to have the timestamp, but you see this timestamp, I'm going to specify it, like created at and updated at. So let me just to save time, let me just duplicate this guy. So this, there needs to be a comma here. So this second token here, I'm going to make it created at, right? So you see I'm giving it a hard property. I'm not just using MongoDB or Mongoose to automatically add it here. So created at, I'll make it a date property, and it's going to be required. Then expires at, so when is it going to expire to? I'll come here, I'll come here and duplicate this downwards, and then I'll just change this to expires at. So expires, great, date, and it's going to be required as well. So that's about it for the model, and we've exported it. So that's the last thing we need to do, module.export. There's nothing wrong here. Now go ahead and save, and let's go back to our instruction.txt file. So we've fulfilled the second instruction, which is to create the token model. The next instruction is to create an email sender function. Okay, so let me just add a function here. Yeah, so we're going to do that in the next video.